Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Becky's Anonymous live stream. My name is Lee. I'm so excited to be here again, especially on today's topic. We have Saroeum Phoung and Thary's son Lim with us from PointOneNorth Consulting. And they're here to talk with us about circle process. And some of you watching this may be familiar with circle process from other experiences you had in your professional or personal life. Some of you may have joined our intro and growth circles and become familiar with circle process. Saroeum and Thary are going to share with us what their work and their journey has been with circle and help us specifically think about how circle process helps us dismantle white supremacy. And part of that is thinking about it's not just the content of what we're talking about when we talk about these themes, but it's just as much about how we're talking about these things with each other. And Saroeum and Thary are here to kind of dig deeper a little bit with us and help us understand that on an even deeper level. I want to remind people to please join us for our intro circles, which are every first Wednesday, and our growth circles, which happen after these live streams to kind of go deeper with the themes. So our growth circle this week, we'll dive deeper on some of the themes that come up today. So I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for taking your time out of your lives and all the great work that you're doing to spend time with us today. And wanted to just first start with hearing from each of you a little bit about your journey to Circle, a little bit about who you are, what your work right now is, if you'd like to share that with our audience. And so, yeah, don't know who wants to start, but
Well, Thary, if you don't mind starting it, that'd be great.
Sure, I can start. So my name is Thary, and thank you, Lee and Han. I'm great to be here today. My name, I already introduced myself, sorry. But I came to Circle Work in 2012 when I met Saroeum, and he invited me to attend a 4-day racial healing circle in Seattle. And that experience completely changed my life. I experienced profound healing in that, and I was able to bear witness other people's stories in that circle, which made the experience so powerful for me. And so since then, I've been involved in a lot of different trainings and circles that Saroeum has hosted with PointOneNorth and also in partnership with other organizations. And I'm now the executive assistant and junior consultant for PointOneNorth, and I'm still learning. And I'm definitely not an expert in this process. And I'm just really excited for the opportunity that I get to learn from Saroeum. And yeah, I'm just also grateful to share some of my experiences with everyone today. So thank you. I'll pass it on to Saroeum.
You hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My name is Phoung again. Honored to be here, Lee and Kim. Thank you so much for having us. I'm here to share my experience. I'm not an expert by any means. I can speak my own truth and what I've been through and how I've been utilized this work in ways to bring my own healing work as much as to, doing healing work with other people who are open to do their own work. So first and foremost, there's many varied types of different circle, many traditions. There's particular lineage and traditions that I'm particularly talking about is called peacemaking circle process. It's come from a lineage of 3 people I want to honor: Harold Gittensby and Mark Wedge, Barry Stewart. These are the 3 people who have been my mentor. They're from the Yukon Territory in Canada, and in particular for Mark and Harold, they're from the Takish Tlingit. They're considered inland Tlingit people from the Yukon Territory. So I've learned this circle process since 1991 while I was in Boston, and for quite some time I've been working for a nonprofit organization called ROCA, and we're building relationship and trust with people, and that's something that I've been intrigued and inspired to. When you think about change, relationship and trust is really important. and because change is very, scary, even for good changes. And so trust and having someone to bear witness or walk you through that process is always a nice thing to do, at least from my experience. So that's kind of like what I did. And then when we bump into Peacemaker Circle 1991 from Harold, Barry, and Mark, this Peacemaker Circle process in particular was really a powerful process that allowed us to accelerate relationship and trust. And since then, we've been doing a lot of training with the three gentlemen I just mentioned for about 7-8 years, doing a lot of work until, the whole organization was like really living this way of life. So for some people, it is a process and you can go far with it, with the process. For some people, this is a principle based to life. It's a lifestyle. That's pretty much. So for the last, 20 something years, experience this work on a regular basis and across this country. It's been a very powerful learning experience for me because I don't have any high education background. And so I was just intrigued about how do I heal myself from my own suffering, from my own trauma. And so that's kind of like my take to do this work. And so it's almost like I didn't choose this path. This path kind of chose me. A lot of it, I'm just sick and tired of dealing with my own angers, my own trauma. And I just didn't know what to do as a kid, as a young man. And when I began to choose life, this whole work around peace and healing come into my life. And that's why I choose peacemaking and healing. And it's not to say that I like peacemaking and healing all the time, to be quite honest. And most of the time I actually don't really like it and as much because, I'm human. I still get angry. I still get all sorts of different things. But just understanding that this is a principle base. So someday I practice this better than other days. And someday I fail miserably. So I'm leading with my own imperfect self to find my own voice and to create the world that I want to create for my own life and for the people that I genuinely care about. And that's pretty much, why I do this work. And that's how this work come into my life. So, yeah, hope that's helpful, Lee.
Very helpful. Thank you. And I think, all of the founders of Becky's Anonymous had experienced Circle in different ways. I had the honor of being able to kind of have my journey include both of you. And I'm super grateful for that. But I think what's important is, as you mentioned, there's many kinds of circles. There's many people doing this work. We're seeing it in a lot of places. But when the founders of Becky's Anonymous came together, all of us kind of said independently, Circle is that place that we feel the most potential for healing, but had never sat in circle with kind of just other white women. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here. Before we dive a little bit more into that, though, I would love to hear a little bit more kind of what the current work is you're doing. What are the circles that both of you are involved in right now, and what that, because I know it's tremendous healing work, particularly in this current moment of the discussions around particularly the criminal justice system. Would love to hear just kind of the current work you all are doing, and then we can dive into a little bit more specifically about how your work and this work here is kind of about challenging those dynamics of white supremacy. So would love to hear kind of what you're doing now.
Thary, you want to give it a try?
Sure. I can talk a little bit about it, and Saroeum, please do add on. And so the work that we're currently involved in now, there's work that we're doing, hosting circles between community and police. So right now we're kind of facilitating conversations and bridging connection, relationship, and promoting healing between police and community. And so that's one of the major things that we're doing right now. We're also doing a lot of different circles, and we're building capacity in Pierce County. So we're involving a lot of people from the system and the community, and hosting circles together to kind of bridge that gap and to promote to promote partnership and collaboration, because system and community often is isolated, and there's a lot of underlying tension there. So we're just trying to bridge the gaps in that. So hosting conversations and trainings with them. We're actually about to have a training, I think next week, with folks from the Pierce County criminal justice system and people in the community. And so that's sort of the work that we're doing at the moment. And I'm sure there's more. I'm just maybe missing some of it. So Saroeum,
And
please.
Thary, our audience is actually from across the country. Do you mind clarifying which state you're talking about? Because we actually have people that are from that area too. So I want to make sure
Sure.
they know we're not talking about Massachusetts.
Yeah. Yeah, Pierce County in Washington State. So it's so right outside of Seattle. So So Saroeum, yeah, please do add the work that that we're doing. I may not have touched on all of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty spot on. I think, just so you know, we're not doing any circle in person. We're doing all of this virtually. And Thary and I have been figuring out how do we do that? How do we share our gifts and this gift in ways that still will be impactful virtually? And that's kind of the way we have, been trying to adapt and problem solve some of these things. Because before COVID-19, we were working with a few criminal justice organizations in the Pacific Northwest to change, to promote, shared leadership and culture transformations inside their own organizations. I think that when people talk a lot about criminal justice system change or criminal justice reform, I'm not so sure that we're all on the same page on a lot of those things. Like in my perspective, in the criminal justice reform work, it's mainly creating something, a programmatic of some sort to do something. And it means that the system are not doing their own work and they still function and doing the same thing. And their belief system are still, their mindset and belief system are still in the same specific kind of like current state of mind or state of being. So the work that I do is very selective. It's not like, hey, someone pay us and let's go do some work. Actually, we don't really care too much about people pay us or not pay. We're interested in people who actually committed to do real work for real change. And we're privileged to work with King County and Pierce County in the Pacific Northwest and state of Washington to kind of inspire them to think through and to really look outside the box. Like, what does this whole system change, criminal justice reform mean? And it's really simple. It's about leadership and culture transformations and changing the hearts and the minds of the people who are working inside the system. Because they're really good at compartmentalize their emotional capacity when they're thinking about harms and traumas and things like that. So that's kind of like what we're trying to do here is to commit it to people who really want to do that work. And then that was kind of the first phase. And then we went to the second phase where system and community are coming to experience this work together. And that's been a very powerful way of doing things. And we call it training, doing the training with system and community, because we didn't want it to name and issues like, let's talk about system and community coming together to. And then when we do that, I think people tend to come to the engagement with boxing gloves and oppositional kind of feelings. And so we call it a training, meaning just allowing people to experience their own transformation while they're doing this work together. And to me, that's probably the most highlight of the work that we're doing. And when people hire us to do program design, alternative diversion program of all sorts of things, or even just doing things that's not going to promote real change, we normally say no to people. And they've been very frustrated. And I think that system are really good at telling you what to do. Control and manage and power and leadership is what they do really well. And sometimes, even though they want change, they still want to control the process, the time and everything. And so those are the people would likely to say no to, because it's not, it just means they don't respect my professions and the work we do. It's just like inviting a surgeon to do operation and tell the surgeon what to do. It just makes no sense. So that's kind of where the work that we're doing here is Pierce County and King County, and I believe that change is going to happen, and then it's already happening in a big way. And my hope to work with Thary is to not to showcase to people that you look at, we have the solutions, or we just say, hey, we're going to continue doing this work on the ground level and try not to get to the media and politics and all those things, because it's just getting wacky and interesting. We just wanted to work with people who are committed to real change. And we normally call it a silent movement. So a lot of the work that we're doing is probably like 5-10 years from now, people started hearing about it. And I prefer it that way, because this is not about quick fixing or making glamorous, claims to say that this is the way. This is definitely one healthy, good way of doing things, but that doesn't mean that everyone wants to do it. You know what I mean? So we're just looking for people who actually want to make real change, and we're just really blessed to work with some of the amazing leaders within the criminal justice system who actually want change, but they didn't know how to. And they did not tell us what to do or give us time frame, like, we're going to give you 2 hours to do racial healing and, let's fix it. It's just like, no, that's not going to work, So we're really honored, privileged to do that work with people here. And there's a lot of strong interest in the, everywhere else. And I'm not interested in spreading the work either. I think for me, it's more about how do we grow the root deeper so it gets more traction. And it's creating ripple effects, So the idea is to create critical mass, build momentum. So it's a movement, build momentum, create critical mass. And at some point it will tip itself, and then when the work is completed, it's not hard, it's them doing the work. So that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Can you tell us a little bit more when you say this, one, why is it circle that you bring to these spaces? Or, well, as you said, I think you're highlighting the importance of intention and how circle isn't about just making anybody and everybody do circle, and that this is, that you're an expert. I appreciate kind of looking at more the process being the expert, and that the process is what helps us bring out all of the expertise within us. But would love to hear kind of more. You describe this as a healthy process. You describe this often as kind of a process that helps us go in a good way. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what is it about circle process that both of you obviously feel so strongly? You've made this a big part of your life's work. So I'd love to hear kind of what is it about circle process that you've particularly connected with, why you think it is kind of a good way to be going in.
All right, you want to do it? You want to take a slap at it, or you want me to do it?
I can go take a stab at it. Sure. So just to kind of answer your question in terms of what is it about peacemaking circles that, well, I think is a good way, or why am I drawn to this work, I think is how I'm hearing the question. And I think it's a tough question, because I know when we sat in a training, we were telling people that it's gonna be hard to describe to people what you just experienced, right? Because you don't quite have the words to tell people. Like, you have to sit in circle and to really understand and to really feel it. And I think for me, it's a process that humanizes everyone, and it builds connection in a world that's often disconnected and often dehumanizes. So I don't think there are many spaces where people can just kind of show up and feel safe and be vulnerable. So it's not to say that, you go to your first circle and then you just kind of open your heart up. It takes time, but I think through time, I've realized how incredibly affirming it is. Circles affirm my humanity. And I think that's really the power of it, and why I'm so drawn to it. And I think you would have to experience it for yourself in order to really understand, because I can't describe it. Yeah. Thanks.
No, I appreciate that. I think one of the parts of that is that it's such it's an intellectual experience, it's a spiritual experience, it's an emotional experience. And, especially when you get in that kind of spiritual part, that's that kind of indescribable part of our humanity that we always struggle with describing. And so I think that, you know, a lot of times people are like, oh, you know, that feels like a little cop out. And it's like, no, it's because it's a full human experience, which oftentimes, you know, describing things is only one way of experiencing things. So appreciate that. And you know what is also part of, I think, what we're trying to do here at Becky's Anonymous is how do you help people get that experience and that repetition and that practice in sitting in that space, so that when they might be in circles that might be even a little bit more dynamic or more conflictual or feeling, you know, or feel a little bit more intense, you know, people have had that practice of sitting in circle with each other, because the more we can be in practice, the better we're going to be at it. And I think also people share, the more they're in circle, the more they notice in their outside life also changes in how they're communicating. So just wanted to say I appreciate, because I similarly say that, but that's kind of how I explain why it's a little bit indescribable. Saroeum, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, we're in the 21st century. Science driven, data driven. It's where we are in our world today. And so when things are not comes in zeros and one, it's really hard for people to understand. And that's just very normal. So to me, I think that, and it's not to say that it's a bad or a good thing. I mean, it's good, you know, for that particular reason, but you can't use that particular reason trying to be something else. So I think that we're really overkill, you know, this whole data-driven, performance-based driven, all of these things, that's including foundations. I mean, these is all trigger down from the very top to the bottom. And then when it comes to emotional aspects of it, we're not good in dealing with this emotional as a society. I think we'll excuse my language, we'll mind fuck ourselves to death, you know, and wondering why these emotional traumas and things that we've dealt with and has not gone away. Because I think that we're trying to outsmart, you know, using our intellectual property, you know, to try to problem solve what is an emotional capacity, which is feeling. And if you look at across the, you know, across the globe, we as human species have not really good at looking at emotions, you know, when it comes to trauma, when it comes to conflict. And matter of fact, most of these conflicts that we created as human species are coming from an emotional capacity. So if you go back to look at what Thary just shared around police and community, you know, we try to always out thinking about what is the contribute factor, what's the data to indicate that there's a problem, and making recommendation and suggestion to change structurals and systems and processes, which is great. But the reason why we're here is not because of the system is needs to be fixed or is it broken. The reason why we're here is because of the mistrust and distrust. We've done harm to one another. We impacting ourselves and each other with emotional capacity, and it causes trauma, creates suffering, and yet we're still intellectualizing the whole thing. So it's really that close, but it's so far away that many of us who think that they are tapping into the emotional capacity are mainly intellectual aspects of things. And so, you know, we haven't done that well. I mean, look at all the infrastructure we built and look at all the resource we invest into promoting conflict across the country and across the globe. We invest so much money into militaries and everything else, you know, but is there a healing department, you know, in anywhere across the world? I don't know. I don't think so. But yet, you know, healing is what we wanted. Healing is what we desired. But we don't know healthy, good ways to do things. So to me, this is a serious problem as human species. We have not healed for so long, and the pain has perpetuated, and human is the great host of this suffering, and that we perpetuated, you know, hurt people. So is healing or heal people. And so when you look at that concept on a very fundamental basis, if it doesn't matter if you're white, you're brown, you could be anyone. As long as you're suffering from something, you will give and pass on those suffering until you heal yourself. Then you know you're not passing on the good stuff. Does that make sense? So I think we got a long way to go. I mean, if you think of the word healing, what does our society think when it comes to healing? Oh, it's kumbaya. Oh, it's woo woo. Oh, it's, holding hand. Like, we mock it. I don't know, is there a word for it? But we dehumanize the process itself, right? We bash it. It's just because we're afraid of what we don't know, and that's human, right? Our brain is mainly tracking and memorizing the things that had already happened. But what life is in front of us is the unknown. We're not good at dealing with that. So I think as human species, we have not come. I mean, we're still behaved like the caveman and the cavewoman. That's, I mean, the only thing we didn't use is the club, maybe bang each other head and drag everyone down the road. But we use gun to do all sorts of things. So so we haven't made the real effort and attempts to heal as human species through our feeling, right? And so to me, I think that there's a danger there, because hurt people, and if human species are hurt, they'll destroy everything, like water, plants, animals. You think about the global scales. We are the troublemaker that make things come to places where it's not balanced, and we need to heal ourselves so that we could take responsibility to repair the harm that we done, not just to a human being, but to our nature, to everything else we have caused harm to. So to me, we're coming at a crossroads, so we can have a conscious choice to decide as a collective that we need to come together, or we can wait until we had no choice. And that's just the truth of it. There will be disaster to a point that we have no choice. By then, maybe most of us are already dead, when we come together. Or we can do it now. So we have those choices every day. And so to me, I think that healing is an essential for human development, to be fully human, because if we're mostly emotional being, then we have to tap into what is emotional being, right? Most of us just somewhat humans. We're stuck in our head too much to the point that we're numb when it comes to feeling, and we're not good at dealing with that. And especially with people who went through a lot of intellectual capacity to do things. They think they can upsmart everything. Like, talk to lawyers, they probably think that they can debate out of life. Life is not about debating. Life, you could live it, appreciate it, or not appreciate it. That's just the choice we have. So we have not come far. That's why our work is unique. And that's why we are selective, because we're not here to make profit or money. We're here to make sure that change is possible, and we're willing to work with those who are willing to do that way, because I don't want my great grandchildren to look at me and say, oh shit, my grandpa was a punk and a half. He didn't care about me. I wanted to know that I love them, I care for them. 7 generations before me and after me. And that's my responsibility as an individual person. So that's just some of my thoughts.
You're on mute, Lee. Yep.
Thank you. I think what it brought up, as you were speaking, what it brought up for me is, I think what I have appreciated so much about circle process, and why I think it's so important for us here at Becky's Anonymous as white women to be practicing it, is it gives that space for healing on all those levels, and that healing change to happen internally. How am I healing that within myself? How am I healing my relationships and my connection to my community? And Becky's Anonymous, we talk a lot about how are we healing these family relationships that are disrupted and impacted by white supremacy, because for a lot of us white women, those are the hardest. We just dismiss those people, we throw them away, and we kind of are trying to say this message of we have a responsibility to be a part of that healing, because we can't put that on people of color, right? These are our people, these are our family, whether you like it or not. And so we are in the best positions to be a part of that healing journey. But then it also helps us really tap into the systemic changes that need to happen, right? And not just sort of leave it at, this is just about you having your own self, as you kind of said, going on my own self kumbaya journey. No, there's equally kind of that systemic healing change you need to be a part of. But what I've really appreciated about Circle, particularly in what we've built so far here at Becky's Anonymous, is that capacity to integrate all of those and interweave those in such a great way. So that's just kind of what it brought up for me as you were speaking. But Thary, any other reactions or thoughts that you think would be helpful?
I think you both summed it up and covered it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me is, peacemaking circle is a process, and it's mainly focused on human first more than the outcome. It's we use a lot of data driven business approach of methodology and process, again trying to problem solve what is human, right? And that's why it's really hard to undo those things, right? So when you think about circle process, it's a human process since the beginning of time. We burn fire, we sat at the kitchen table. We'll sit around the fire, we eat food, we tell stories. It doesn't matter what skin color you come from, you know what I mean? This is natural way of, if we still do that in camping today, you know. And the beauty of this is that the talking piece is really the essential piece of how people share stories and how people listening to one another. I think that there's a lot of people who has amazing story. Tara, you might want to mute yourself. Yeah, there's a lot of people who have stories um, that they want to share, but I don't think that there's enough people who are willing to listen, and that's a serious problem. I think that most of us are stuck in a place where we listen and waiting to respond. And what Peacemaking Circle allows to do is that there is a greater listening component to this, right? So when you're in a space where people are so attuned and attentive to listen to you, then people are showing up, even though they may be reluctant to share things that are uncomfortable. But then when there is such a space that created in that way, then people are more willing to share it in a much deeper, reflective kind of way. Now, why storytelling and peacemaking in a circle is really important, because when you tell your life story, you begin to be reflective and you begin to see that in your journey there is such a thing called pain and joy. Does that make sense? And so you don't show loyalty to pain, you don't show loyalty to joy. You just say that this is part of your life. And then you begin to be reflective and learn from all those things. And then allow you to move on to the present moment and create the future that you want to be. And so storytelling help us look at life from the beginning to the present moment, to understand that yes, we've come a long way, become so far, and these things are really important. Without reflection, there is no learning. Without looking back and learn from our past, then we'll make the same mistake that we made in the past. And most of us just live in the past because of a lot of trauma and unresolved grief. So it doesn't matter. So to me, I think that if you look at healing in the context of storytelling and in public and in community, white people don't do that really well. When it comes to healing, they will talk about some other nonsense stuff, like crazy shit. I'm just like, are you serious? Talk about your damn family. Talk about what hurt you the most. Talk about what is close to you the most. Because if we're saying hurt people, then if you don't heal from your own trauma, then you'll continue to hurt other people. And if white people are the most dominant and privileged, then you do the same thing. Does that make sense? So helping hosting circle for people of color to share and open up their emotion is really judgmental, when it comes to race in this country or criminal justice, for example. Like for me as an ex-gang banger, that's why I swear a little bit here and there. I love that because I don't want people to think I'm perfect or anything like that. I'm still a human being. I'm still pissed. I'm still frustrated. But hopefully my behavior and how my action is in doing this work is that I do it in the concept of causing less harm or no harm, right? So to me, I think that if you look at white people in particular, their healing methodology are very different. They go to therapy one-on-one. They go to family counsel, maybe freaking a few people, and they do that behind closed door. Does that make sense? Because most people can afford that. And if you think about structural positions of power within the system, they have capacity to do that too. They have insurance that covers that. They get enough money to pay for that. But if you think about people who cannot have access to those things, where do you think they go heal? In the traditional way, coming as indigenous people, myself, we rely on the village to help us. When there's broken relationship of some sort, the village responsibility to look after the people. Does that make sense? So the leadership who is chief understand that leadership is about the people. We have political arena and people in position of power who are more manager, control and manage. They want to control, manage instead of leading the people, right? So we have too many things that are really conflicted with one another. So the only way I think that will help us move forward in a good way is that white folks need to stop healing by themselves, and they need to stop talking about other things. Talk about your own family, what hurts you, what makes you memorable. All of these things are really essential, because then you're copped out, and then you let other people to come in and share their stories. Like, well, shit, I'm doing all this stuff, and you're sitting there, and it's most likely people say, well, I'm so privileged, and I can't follow up that story. No, it's not comparing, competing. Storytelling is one person's stories. Pain is pain. Joy is joy, no matter how it is, right? A person could have a cat that died, and this person has so much connection to the cat, and they would mourn and grieve for a very long time, right? Or someone will lose someone they love, and they grieve for a long time. It's a relationship and connection and meaning that we have to things that makes us feel these ways, right? Because that's what's human. You know what I mean? So to me, if we're thinking about, I don't know, using the word white supremacy and all that, because I'm sharing this from a peacemaking, healing perspective, right? When you think about dismantling something, that's a pretty tough one. I mean, I coach mixed martial art too. I've seen someone dismantle someone. It's painful, right? If anybody wants me to do that, I'd be more than happy to volunteer my time to dismantle them. And you know what I mean? That's happened for them. So to me, an action that promote conflict is not going to bring peace. Does that make sense? Peacemaking, it's just peacemaking. Does that make sense? So to me, if we really truly want to talk about peace, truth, and reconciliations in today's world, we need to learn how to heal in public as a collective. And we need to stop compare and compete, right? We have to think about humanize each other first before we actually change the system and the structure. We can change the structure, but if you and I don't feel really right and distrust with one another, you can change all you want, but it will not change the way that I look at you, or you hate me and I hate you. These are the things that destroy us as an individual and as a collective. So to me, when we think about white supremacists, or privileges, or systems of oppressions, or institutional racism, because rightfully so, people in this country face racism in those contexts. And the direct conflict that comes from these culture of perpetuating dominations and structure to create dominations is, you can see that on the news every day, right? And the people who are impacted by it are just sick and tired of it. But how do you change something, right? You can change the structure, but if white people feel that they think they're more privileged and better than us, does it really change their belief that Saroeum is a human being? I don't think so. I think that we're so disconnected as a species. So your color, my color is 1% that is different as human. The rest of the stuff, we're 99.9% more the same. If we're focusing on what is different, then that will divide us, no matter what change we're creating. If we're focusing on the 99.9% that we're more the same, I think we might have a shot. Because healing in public, bear witness each other's stories using peacemaking circle is probably the most powerful way, because it helps us humanize each other, to recognize that there is human on the other side, that no matter what colors their skins are, economic background are, that they're suffering just like everyone else. I've never met one person that has not gone through any type of suffering and pain. And yet, I have never met a person that doesn't have joy in their life. If this is what we do as human species, that we experience joys and pain, we need more. We need each other more than we ever been. So I commend you guys for gather folks who are white and believe that we need to do things differently. And I'm really grateful that you're thinking about that, because if you look at the beginning of time with Frederick Douglass, the abolitions, and the black abolitions and the white abolitions, this is what make change in this history in the country, right? This is why the Fourth Amendment was written, and it's still not being honored today. That's why the women's right, all sorts of rights coming from the 14th Amendment, in my perspective, right? So to me, I think there's a lot of commonality there, but we can't focus on what are different and trying to unite us. We have to focus on what is more the same, because we are more the same than we are different. Now, it's hard for people to hear that, see that. But when you set in 3-day circle together or 4-day circle, then you realize, like, oh my goodness, I'm more just like you and you're more just like me. And so when we are able to tell our story, not on a surface level, but more on a deep and the forgotten story, that's where we're going to make a difference. And I think that the forgotten stories is the hardest one. I think with white folks are really different, because they don't ever talk about the historical trauma. You know what I mean? During the plague, during the Roman, during all the shit that you guys go through, talk about that crap, because people die. There are millions of them dead, right? Where's the healing process as a collective, as a people? You haven't dealt with that. So, and if you haven't dealt with that, then hurt people hurt people. Does that make sense? So if you dealt with that, then no matter how much chaotic the world are, heal people, or a peaceful person. Dwayne, Di was talking about that. What is it? People who are peaceful person, they will, no matter how chaotic the world are, they will go out there and act on peace, right? People who are hostile people, no matter if the world is at peace, they will cause chaos, right? So to me, I think that healing in the 21st century in terms of peace and reconciliation has to do with human individual healing process in a public setting. And if we learn how to do that, then Black people, then Asian, then Native American people can share their stories. I love the fact that Fred Douglass did storytelling many, many, many years ago. And I think he's the greatest man actually in this country when you think about freedom, liberties, equality. Because when he was invited to talk during the 4th of July, to share to 600 white people who at that time, slave was really judgmental. Being a Black person in this country is not great, right? And yet he went out there and he told his story. He said, well, why you invite me to be here? To speak on the 4th of July. Your ancestors should be, you should be proud, because as white people, your ancestor, connected to you, that you have the freedom and liberty. But for my people, as Black people, we have to go and mourn, because it's suffering for us. Your joy costs us suffering. Does that make sense? Now, those people are not clear. They were like, oh, shoot, well, what are you talking about? Until he took off his shirt and showed his back and said, this is why. Now, that storytelling right there, where people can connect and visualize and understand that there's humanity in each other, that really impacted senators and people to write these 14 amendments, and led to the Civil War. All these things are really essential historical way of doing things. So we have to go back to that storytelling, where people who've been suffer, or people who on the other side considered the victim or the offender, needs to come together, and we need to honor that we've hurt each other, and we have to say that we need to stop that. We need to figure that out. But until we begin to heal and build trust and relationship where we felt safe with one another, then we'll be at war with one another. Does that make sense? I know there's a long-winded kind of like conversations there, but I think that peace and reconciliation has to begin with the individual willing to do their own work and do that in public with other people. That's just my thoughts.
I'll say kind of what it quickly brought up for me, and then Thary, would love any last thoughts from you, and then we'll kind of do our last kind of ending closing quote with any last thoughts from you all. But I think, Saroeum, what you brought up for me is one, reminding, I'm going to remind myself, I really appreciate you saying this isn't, circle process isn't about dismantling white supremacy. This process was around before white supremacy. It's a much longer, stronger, healthier wisdom, and just the fact that it still is here for us is a testament to it being the stronger, healthier process. And I think what I'm hearing though for white people, right, is we have this opportunity to connect back to our human story and take things kind of what are we building, not what are we necessarily just dismantling, but what are we building, and how that's a reminder to all of us white people of how do we get in touch with our human story. And you listed the many, many reasons why, and because of what, white supremacy does that to us is as you said, Thary, dehumanizes us, makes us disconnect from our story and our humanity, from each other. So really appreciate that reminder of kind of what really is circle process about and peacemaking process about. So just wanted to highlight that. Thary, any last reactions to what was said, or anything else you wanted to contribute to that piece before we end?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to say that peacemaking is not for everyone. It's simple in theory, but it's not easy. I know that that's what Saroeum usually says, is simple but not easy, because people have to be willing and open to do their own work. This is not about changing others. It's about showing up and being part of the process and doing your own work. And whenever we engage people in this process, it's never by force, and it's always by invitation. And so it's whenever people are willing and ready and open to do their own work, that's when this process works. And so I think if people are open and willing to engage and show up and do their own personal work, then that's where change can begin. And so that's what I wanted to add. Thanks.
I think that's a beautiful place for us to kind of end here. I wanted to invite, kind of on that note, just invite to our audience for white women that would like to get involved with our particular circles, but also wanted to highlight, this is one piece of the many ways you can get involved in this work. So want to encourage people to certainly look for other ways, in your communities that you can be a part of this. But in addition to that, I want to welcome everyone again to our intro circles, where you get mostly familiar with more of just kind of the rhythm of circle and what that process is like. And then once you do the intro circle, you're welcome to come to any of the monthly growth circles you can pop in and out of, though you don't have to come every month. To Thary's point, the point is to really come when it feels good, and that it's an invitation and open door always. And so want to encourage people to check that out if you'd like. So we're gonna just end with a ending quote, but I wanted to thank both of you so much for being here and taking time out of the tremendous work that you all do to be here with us and to speak to our specific audience. Like I said, in our growth circle, we'll be taking a lot of the stuff that you all have said and kind of diving deeper and reflecting internally with us about how we can really take a lot of the messages that you all have encouraged to motivate ourselves to take action, and kind of what does that continue to look like. And wanted to also say, I think that one of the most important pieces to this is that there will never be that moment we kind of arrive. Circle is kind of something that is kind of always part of our life as long as we're in the human form. So thank you. And to that point, we're just going to kind of end with a quote. And this quote is from someone named Dave Chief from the Oglala Lakota. And this is how they describe circle in a couple of sentences. So we'll just kind of leave with this thought on circle process. And again, just want to invite everyone to join ours in the future. The circle has healing power. In the circle, we are all equal. When in the circle, no one is in front of you. No one is behind you. No one is above you. No one is below you. The sacred circle is designed to create unity. And so just want to say again, thank you to all of you who took the time to spend time with us on this live stream. You can always watch this again in the future on all of our social media. I just want to again thank Saroeum and Thary from PointOneNorth Consulting. Wish you all the best in all your amazing work, and look forward to continuing to connecting. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Lee.
Bye.
Be safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.